Okay, there was a lawyer who practiced law at different courthouses all the way from Charleston to Webster County, and he'd get there either by train or horseback in those days. And every time he came to a different courthouse along the Elk River all the way from Charleston up to Webster County, and he would fish the Elk River, and he'd write little stories that were published in the Braxton County Democrat back then, and they eventually, I think, put all his short stories about his fishing adventures into a book called The Tale of the Elk. His name is W.E.R. Byrne, and this is one of the first spots, or the furthest spot from Charleston that he fished. It's called the Split Rock. As you see, it's split, and when the water is lower, like in the summer and the fall, none of this water is pouring over here. Now this water, this is called the Big Spring Fork of the Elk River, down near Slady Fork, where Beckwith's lumber mill is. The Elk River forks. The fork to the left as you're coming up the river is called the Big Spring Fork. I have been here at this rock in summer and fall, where the water only bubbles up, where you see all that white water in the center right there. It literally bubbles up. It's underground back this way. There's actually no water, like you saw. You'll see a dry spot below where this water goes back up underground. There's a little bit of water flowing over here now. You could hear that. Flows right into the split rock there. But in the summer, none of this water is flowing over. This is all bone dry in this area right here, and it begins there. And you can see how big it's getting down there. And that's for two reasons. One, there's the water that's pouring over the top and falling into the split rock. And the other is the water that's literally just boiling up right there. Because look at how big it is below there. It's a split rock where the water bubbles up. See, they built a bridge over top the split rock, unfortunately. This is known as the fountain source to the Elk River. Clear, cold water. We're about a half mile below the split rock, and you can see the water has disappeared. It bubbles up in different spots, but it's basically almost bone dry here. It goes underground when it's not high water conditions. You can see right above this pool right here, it's dry up there. Then the water's coming back up. See some coming up there. Just to show you how it bubbles back up out of the ground, look at that right there. And it's coming up from underneath this rock. In between these rocks here. Right here. You'll see it just coming up, back up out of the ground. And you won't be able to see it, but that little piece of the river right there, it's bubbling up right there too. So where it was dry above between the split rock and where Sharp's Country Store is, and then close to this big spring, and a small spring that I'm going to show you. It's bubbling back up from underground to the top here. The more I look, the more I find these spots. Look at how it's just coming up from underground here into the Big Spring Fork. All along here. It forms this fork of the Elk, gets bigger and bigger as it goes down. Okay, another site that Byrne talks about in his book, it's on down the Big Spring Fork from where the split rock is. There's a huge spring right here where the water just boils up out of the ground. You see it just dead ends right here. You should be able to see the ripple of the water there. Let me get around this bushes. Here, look right here where it's coming out of the ground. So it's just a big spring right here, and see, it goes down there. Pretty substantial quantity of water that's boiling up right here. Let's see if this camera picks this up. You can see an area boiling up right there. Now, much further down where the two forks form, below places called the Boiling Hole and the Black Hole below that, and the Flat Rock. There's a couple springs down there. I'll show you those as well. That's close to what used to be called Calger's Mill. You see how the water just boils up out of the ground here. I'll show you one more time. I'm at the upper end of where this water is boiling out and forming a fairly substantial stream that way. This is the main part of the Big Spring Fork. And you'll see the same thing. Right here, there's just water gushing from underground, dumping into the Big Spring Fork of the Elk River. Coming up underneath this here, all along here. See how the water's just gushing up, going into the main part of the Big Spring Fork. This is about half mile above Beckwith's Mill, which is close to where the forks are. About 75 yards long, is known as the Boiling Hole. And in the center of your picture, you'll see water boiling. I'm going to walk over there in a minute. You can see there's just a trickle of water coming in. This is about 4 miles above the Black Hole. Some of the water is leaving this hole and going down river, and then there's some creeks along the way that are feeding into it before it disappears somewhere before the Black Hole, which I'll go find. I don't know if that's water sucking underground or water bubbling up, but for whatever reason they named this the Boiling Hole. You can see it's boiling up over there in a couple spots. Right there. Couple spots right there, it's boiling up. This is why they call it the Boiling Hole. I think it's a couple springs coming up. I'm going to go over there and feel it since the water's so low. Here's another look at the Boiling Hole from the upriver side. Looks like the water's boiling just like the book says. See, that's not caused by that little bit of water pouring in there. I came over to the rock where these boiling spots are and stuck my hand in there. It's actually water coming up from underground somewhere. It's like there's a hose underneath there. In fact, if you see the split in this rock right here, See, the water's actually going backwards because it's pouring out of this rock. Saw probably a 2-foot trout at the hole below this. Okay, this is known as the dry fork of the Elk. It's about 5 miles above the Flat Rock, 6 miles maybe above Cowger's Mill, that area where the Elk Springs Resort is. You see, even today, first day of spring, March 21st, 2023, the dry fork is dry. Now, this area down here, maybe about a quarter mile upstream of where we're at and 5 miles downstream, is known as the dry bed, because in the summertime this goes bone dry, and even late into the fall you walk across this and not get a drop of water on you. But there's a lot of snow melt off and it's springtime, so there's water in this. But usually this is dry right here. Dry bed of Elk River, about now 5 or 6 miles above Cowger's Mill, and I'm at where this little fork here is called the dry fork. If you take that fork up, it goes up to I guess Valley Head Mango in that area. And if you keep going up Main Elk, which I'm going to get to the Black Hole and the Boiling Hole, that'll take you up to the forks of, I think it's Big Field Fork and Old Spring Fork, just below Beckwith's Mill. So that's looking up Elk River there in the dry bed area. As you can see, for obvious reason, there's not a lick of water in here. And that's looking back down towards Cowger's Mill. Bone dry. It's June 20th. Back in 1976, this line was still wide open from Webster Springs up to Slady Fork and then over to Cass. And in 76, they brought a steam engine from Cass, from up this direction, into Webster Springs. They called it the Salt Sulphur Special. And they gave tourist rides that day in 76. The late Sheriff D.P. Given, who was never a sheriff, was a House of Delegates member for one term, had lobbied the community and others for scenic railroad. And unfortunately it didn't happen. It'd probably be the main attraction in Webster Springs right now if they had it. From that old B&O Baltimore and Ohio Depot all the way up here. Now, the last time I was here, 30 years ago, there was evidence of these rails being used by, I think they called them motor rail cars. I forget the actual name of them. Little, like 2-seat, maybe 4-seat cars that ran on rails, small engines. But I think there's sections of this track up here that have deteriorated, where it's not safe going across creeks and things that dump into the Elk. Just right over in there. We're going to walk up at least a half mile here and look for what's called the Black Hole, see if we can find it. It's where some of the volume of the water when it's dry. Actually, if there's any water still in it, by the time it gets to the Black Hole, it disappears into it, goes underground. It doesn't bubble up until you get down to the springs at Cowger's Mill. You know, the Black Hole's in an area like this where the river curves and there's a rock ledge on the other side. I don't think I've come up far enough past where the original dry bed is yet, though. It's kind of an area like that. It goes right up underneath a rock ledge on the opposite side. See how much smaller the river is here the further up you go? Because some of this water is sinking underground up at the Boiling Hole and at the Black Hole. And I'll tell you what, this curve of the river here, where this straightens out, that Black Hole could be right underneath those rocks there. Just 3 or 4 feet of water I can't see. When I was here 30 years ago, there was just a trickle of water. Oh, 1/10 of what you see today, and what water was here was going right underneath that rock ledge. That may or may not be it, so. I'm going to look at another spot, see if there's any more ledges along here. But boy, this is right about the right distance, according to Byrne's book, Tale of the Elk, about where it should be. And you know, you don't see any fishermen along here. A couple reasons. One, it's a little harder to get to. Two, because this goes dry during the summer and fall, most of the fish move out of this area. And there's no way for stock trucks to get up here. It's too bad. What a beautiful stretch of river. We're about 100 feet downriver of where the creek from Black Hole Hollow empties into the Elk River here. And I believe that Black Hole is just right over there underwater though. Right in that area there, along that ledge. It's where it goes underwater when there's low water conditions. Coming up to a small bridge over this sizable stream. I believe this is called Black Hole Hollow. So that rock ledge formation that I was filming right before this, pretty sure that's where the Black Hole is. There has to be a lot less water in it for you to see what happens. They call that Black Hole Hollow because of the black hole down there. Right off to the left down there where we were filming. Well, this bridge is still intact. Big hole of water in a curve here should be teeming with fish and fishermen. And my memory tells me, even though that's 30 years ago, that black hole was right below this big hole of water. So that was it back there. It's really the only ledge that I've seen, so that has to be it by default. Because we're a good half mile past where I parked it there, and that's where the black hole is. Plus we just crossed Black Hole Hollow. But this is the start of the dry bed, and that actually right there is the black hole, where when there's water in the river, it'll empty into that hole and goes underground until it comes back up at those springs down at Calgary's Mill, about 6 or 7 miles down. But as you can see, there's not even water here on June 20th. I'm going to go get a close look at that hole. As you see, the river's just dry here. There's a little bit of dampness to the rocks, and there are some puddles here where it's probably seeping underground. And there is a stream coming off the mountain because there was a pretty good rain last night and this morning. You might be able to hear that in the background, or you can see a little water trickling right there. Oops. Which means most of the water of this river must be going underground at what's called the boiling hole, which is another, I believe, mile or 2 miles up yet. So it's still got a good ways to go. This is about a half mile from the dry fork where I parked the truck at. Yep. I'm only a few feet away from this black hole where the water sucks under there. Just a cave, I guess, where it goes underground. If I had nerve, I'd go in there, but I'm not going to. Last time I was here, I'd be standing in about 4 feet of water right now. This is the black hole. Okay, this whole area that I've just filmed is the flat rock. Smooth as a flat iron. flat as a smoothing iron, as the author of the Tale of the Elk puts it, W.E.R. Bill Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E. I have been here where there's not one drop of water over this rock. This is the big flat rock up above Cowger's Mill. Maybe about half a mile to a mile. I'd say 50 yards wide at its widest, and at least 100 yards long. As you can see, it's got a bluish tinge to it in spots. This is known as the dry bed section of the Elk River. There's a little bit of water on this from the recent rain. Now if you notice, part of the rock here has like a blue-greenish tinge to it. I'd say more blue. I hope this camera will pick it up. A huge rock. Flat all the way across. And I brought my waders, I had to walk across this. I didn't think the water would be this high. Hoping you can see the blue color that's on this rock here for some reason. It's a couple hundred feet in length here. Its widest spot maybe 100 feet. Right here's about the edge of it, where this gravel and rocks have piled up. I'm going to launch the drone here, give you an aerial view of this unreal sight. The caretakers of the property happened to be pulling in when I was driving by, and they let me come down here, so I'm real grateful to the owner and their caretakers. Let me walk out here. Okay, this is the first of the two springs known as the Elk Spring when you're coming down river from the dry bed, the 5 miles of the dry bed. You can see where the water just bubbles up back up out of the ground here. Now it's the first day of spring, March 21st, 2023. There's still water in the main part of the Elk over the dry bed right now. But this is where, when it's dry, this is where the water bubbles back up, and then about 200 yards down there's a spring closer to where the Cowger Mill sat. The second one that contributes to the volume of water bubbling back up. But you can see how much water this is producing. River quantity of water there. Just bubbling up right here. Doesn't look like this little area right here would produce that much water. You see right here along the edge of these trees. Just coming right out of the hillside. And there's no creek on the other side of the road. This is just bubbling up. Okay, we're below the dry bed here still. We're near where Cowger's Mill is in the present-day Elk Springs Resort. And there's two springs here. This is the second one. And you'll see the water just comes up out of the ground here. It's odd. Standing on dry ground all around, you just see the water gushing out all around here. And it's a substantial quantity of water that you see coming out of this small area here. This may be called the Cowger Spring. Not 100% sure. I know the one above that I said was the Elk Spring. You see there's no creek on the other side of this. There's no culverts. It's just bubbling up out of the ground. Dumps here. That other spring is just right up above here, maybe about 200 yards. Whitaker Falls on the Elk River, main Elk. This will be the last spot coming from the split rock up in Pocahontas County that we'll film for this segment of the Tale of the Elk. No one's fishing here. The DNR just stocked fish here. They're about a quarter mile down the road stocking more fish.